Hello, everyone. Welcome to our wrap up discussion of Grand Conspiracy with Janny Wurts. The author is kind enough to join us today, and Jared and Chris are doing their usual swiping the book across the screen maneuvers. Yeah, we have been reading the series. And Janny,
Oh, that's a good one.
I gotta do mine now. So, so this is the fifth book of the Wars of Light and Shadow series. This discussion group, approximately, there are a few people missing today, but we have been reading our way through the series, approximately 100 to 150 pages every 2 weeks. We have currently finished the fifth book. We are set to start the sixth book in about a month. If you'd like to read along with us, join us for these discussions either here or just, on the forum. Consider checking out the Page Chewing forum. With me, I have the usual group of wonderful people we discuss this with, plus Janny Wurts herself. So we'll go around the room doing introductions, and then I guess we will dig through Janny's brain for all the questions we have.
Yeah, so me first. I think I'm in the hot seat this week. My name's Chris Moe, and I sometimes YouTube, but sometimes appear on other people's channels having great discussions like this one, and also frequent haunter of the Page Chewing forums where Varsha tries to steal points off everybody.
That I do.
Yes. You're up, Jared.
Fellow haunter of the Page Chewing forums, and I also run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel where I talk about all kinds of fantasy type books, especially these ones here. So, Janny's next.
Well,
We all
what
know
can
that.
I say? It's all my fault.
It is all you.
11 book series, Wars of Light and Shadow, 21 novels now, something like that. 36 published short stories, and I do my own artwork. Have since the start, so I'm still at it.
Nice. And Chibipo.
Yep. Chibipo, also a haunter of the Page Chewing forums and longtime reader of the series.
Very nice. So I have a burning question.
Well, first, can we just congratulate Janny on finishing the series?
Yes.
Oh,
this,
yeah.
this year?
Yes.
Very round of applause there, because that's an incredible feat, and so I know
It's real.
it's real. Yeah,
Look at
I
that.
saw it.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
a big
awesome.
one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something for everybody to look forward to, because it was just it's an outstanding accomplishment, and it should be recognized as such.
Yeah.
Comes out May 27th, 23rd.
May 23rd, and the audiobook has been postponed until June 6th because we have Colin Mace, yippee, but they needed the extra 2 weeks because it's such a big book to make sure the production is up to the quality that they want. So the audiobook, if you have it on pre-order, is just a few weeks later. It'll be worth the wait, getting Colin back.
Yeah.
And so Colin is doing Curse of the Mistwraith. That'll be out in audiobook on the 25th. He did Destiny's Conflict, and now he's doing Grand Conspiracy. And the hope is that everybody will pre-order like crazy, because then maybe we'll get the whole rest of the series in audio. And I think it would be gorgeous to do it because it was honestly written to be read aloud.
Nice.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I agree. All right, what's that burning question?
Oh, but just before we do that, April 25th, right, for Curse of the Mistwraith. So it's a month before.
Oh yeah.
But yes, my burning question. It's actually a really silly question, so I'm sorry for building up the anticipation. But I was curious. Fionn Arid reads really close to being an anagram of Arathon's name. Is that what it is, or is it?
Not deliberately. It was actually derived from the translation. In the glossary, you can see the root meaning.
Mhm.
But hey, if I did something accidental like that, I'll claim the credit. In a way, it fits.
Yeah. It's almost, but not quite.
Not quite.
Anagram, but
Not quite.
Yeah.
If it were me making an anagram, it would have been precise.
Nice. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Because
Yeah.
nothing, absolutely nothing in this series wasn't done deliberately.
Yeah.
And some of it isn't going to spring until Song of the Mysteries. You will be astonished.
I'm
So it
regularly
says,
astonished as it is. It's just one of those series, yeah.
Can't take any more astonishment.
I'm actually waiting for you to dive off the brink at Peril's Gate, because that's where it starts to slide into you are no longer in Kansas anymore.
Hmm.
A whole new level will surface in Peril's Gate, and it will only accelerate. So that is the tipping point. And so I'm literally rubbing my hands. I can't wait to see you guys fall off the ledge
I need
and
to
go,
buy,
oops, everything we thought we knew is wrong.
I need to
Mm.
buy my sparkly red shoes just in case I'm feeling out of my depth a little bit, just to give me some way to rescue myself.
I'll throw you a rope. You can use the book to ground yourself if you
That's
get the
true.
hardback. It's about this thick.
Yeah, it is a pretty big book, right?
Yeah, the song is bigger.
Is Perils Gate the biggest book in the series?
No, Song is bigger than Peril's
Oh,
Gate,
like
but
up
not
to.
by a whole lot. But it's still, Song of the Mysteries is still less than the biggest Malazan book by a lot. It's still less than some of the Robin Hobbs. It's definitely less than some of the Tad Williams.
oh yeah,
Yeah, it came in at under 400,000 words.
Hmm.
So in a lot of those bigger series, if you look, especially Gabaldon, man, she read 500,000 words on one of hers. So it's actually shorter than many of the big tomes in the field, which is how I won the war about not having it split.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like this is impossible. Really? And then I gave them a 25 book list of all the other fantasies, some of them theirs that weren't split. Oh, we'll
Well-
go back to production.
And you have the physical proof as well now to say that it actually was possible. The realms of possibility are.
Of course it
are
was
up-
possible. I knew it was possible, but I couldn't bring it in any shorter. If I'd clipped it any tighter, I would have lost stuff.
Speaking of splitting things, this was supposed to be. I
Good segue.
think Chibipo mentioned that it was a three-book arc. This the Alliance of the Light was meant to be, but you had to split it out into a 5-book series. Would you talk a little bit about that? When did the split happen, and was it for publication, or did you realize as you were writing that you had more story to tell?
While I was writing this, it was a continual battle to keep what they call the profit and loss statement above water. Because unless you're making a massive press run, these big, huge books cost more money. And the publishers changed. The original deal when I started was 10% profit was plenty enough. Well, then everything changed. Everything went corporate. Everything went crazy. They began to demand 20% profit, then 25% profit. So it's got harder and harder to do large books. And many of my peers, their books were being split into big, little narrow things. So you'll see things in duologies that really should have been one book, would have read much better in one book. So I had always planned for this to be a story in 5 arcs. People early on mistook that for 5 books. No, 5 arcs. So in the process of the build, as the 3rd arc raises you to worldview, where you see where all the factions are coming from. If I was not to just sit there and give you a history lesson, it had to be unfolded through the action of the characters and through events in the series. So in order to sketch worldview around actual events, it just took a long chunk of writing. And when I got to about when I hit 900 pages in draft or 1,000, I'm looking at the bare edge of what they're going to publish without screaming. So I could see as Grand Conspiracy was pacing out that what occurs in Peril's Gate just was not going to fit. So I made the decision to put a good ending on this one, which I did, and then take the space that it took. So the middle arc, which is the biggest set of reveals for certain stages of the world, taking it to worldview and beginning to hint at what's coming in arc 4, which stages for the mysteries. I just needed the space to do it properly. So it wound up a 5-book arc, but all the events that are meant to be there are there. Nothing jumped in by surprise. I just went at a more measured pace, and you're going to find after Peril's Gate, the pace is going to accelerate tremendously because a lot of what you need to know is already on the ground, and the expansions that happen from there are already built and hinted at. So it's a logical extension. So suddenly, where each book before that had events that reflected events earlier in the book from a different angle, and you were gaining knowledge of what happened earlier in the book from those different angles, after Peril's Gate, I didn't need to do that anymore.
Hmm.
So at that point, I figure you're in for the series. Now I'll give you a timeline. But you're in for the series. Now you don't need to know anything more from the prior events until you get to Song, and then I'm going to blow your mind. So I didn't have to sidestep that and reflect earlier events in the book from a different vantage, from a different event. So that kind of do-si-do didn't have to happen anymore. And that's why the pace suddenly just gallops. Because it was done through the events, because it was done through the character's eyes, because it was done through a searing revelation, you don't forget those changes in perspective. I had to make it firm enough that embedded in your mind that you weren't going to forget and go, I don't understand why this is happening here. It had to be a traumatic event or a peak moment or an intense for those revelations to stick. Because you're carrying all those layers of abstraction now as you move forward. And Peril Gate is that tipping point.
Interesting.
So
Well,
it will avalanche. It will avalanche forward after that.
Yeah, the last 3 chapters in Grand Conspiracy were kind of a galloping whirlwind as it was. There's a lot of, you had like a 20-page action scene in here that was like fascinating. It just kept you like on the edge of your seat. And then I started Peril's Gate, so I can tell these guys it just keeps going. It
5 minutes later.
It doesn't let up. And so that
Uh-uh.
was like a fascinating, you know, because normally when we start a new novel so far in the series, we're starting with, you know, some sort of, you know, build up to get you involved in the story and to get you going. And then all of a sudden I go into Peril's Gate and I'm like, whoa, the
Not
action
going to
just
happen. Yeah.
keeps going here. And,
don't need
and
it.
so,
Don't need it. But see, in order for
really
those
cool.
that last action sequence in Grand Conspiracy to work, you needed that lead up.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't going to have the searing emotional impact if you couldn't see all of the vector things coming to bear and all the pressures coming to bear on that one scene that explodes. And so it's all very deliberate.
Yeah.
There is no wasted space here. You will find that out if you haven't already, but you're especially going to find it out going forward.
Yeah, no, that's something that's really apparent in it. Whenever you go back and you read a section from earlier, you can see how deliberate everything is when you read it again. Going into there, even just going back today and looking at some of my earlier notes, I was like, oh yeah, that makes completely sense now that I've read the ending and now I'm actually going into the next book. And so everything, yeah, it's very clear that everything is very deliberate.
It was already there. If you go
Yeah.
back to book 1, it was already there. You
Yep.
didn't have the perspective to see it. You were focused on other things on the page. But if you're
Yeah.
given the perspective to see it, you realize it was already there. It was all
Yeah.
there.
And it's easy to focus on different things on the page as you're reading it the first time because there's a lot of information, and so it is easy to miss stuff the first time and then go back. Fortunately, we're talking about it a lot, so we get a chance to reflect on a lot of things that we might have missed and then remind each other. So it's this kind of conversation thing has really, I think, been key in enjoying these books even more.
And I guess some of us tend to latch on to different aspects of the story. So when we all bring it together, I guess together, we maybe notice more, but there's still a lot, I would think, that is probably slipping us right by.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Jared and I were rereading Dune recently, and for me, it was a completely different reading experience to read
Yeah.
some, like, when I don't have to try to tease out what each thing means, and I just like already know some things, and now I can understand other aspects of the story. So, yeah, I I think this is a series that I'll definitely be rereading for that, and maybe on audio if all of the audiobooks are out by then. um, yeah. So, sorry, did anybody else have a point to bring up?
No, you can go ahead, Farson.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about the elemental magic that we saw the Fellowship do in this book. I think when they were doing the grand augury of sorts, I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terminology, but it was really interesting how they had to ask the elements for permission to enter, and then they used them to do their what is it called, the augury, right, the thing that they did at the solstice. But yeah, I seem to remember from the first book that Asandir was bemoaning that the people who were in Tassin Eller had given uh, Arathon and Lysair elemental powers. So is this the same thing, like what Arathon and Lysair have can wield? Is that the elemental magic that the Fellowship sorceress took help of for that scene?
Yes, I'll try to take this apart. What Arathon and Lysair have stems direct from the element. It was done without permission.
Hmm.
It is not heritable, so their offspring will not carry this power. It was a one-shot deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to expand a little bit on some of the building blocks that I was playing with to make this series have universal foundation. If you look at physics, there are 4 powers that create matter. You have your strong force, your weak force, gravity, and electricity. Right? 4.
Mhm.
Strong force, weak force, gravity,
Electricity.
and electromagnetics. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the fundamental forces, I guess.
if you look at some of the underpinnings of some of the what do I want to say? The cosmos view of some of the cultures that have gone before us and have looked at the world differently. They have earth, air, fire, and water. There's always 4 powers that create matter. There are always 4 powers that handle the universe. And if you look at some of the other mythoses, they split them down into 12 atavistic powers. In other words, you start looking at the cosmos view of other cultures, and you'll see the same things keep cropping up.
Hmm.
You know, the Native Americans have your 4 directions. You have, if it's universal. So if you take those 4 powers in physics and you assign them to an elemental power or to one of those 4 cosmos views of the universe, these are the forces that direct and create matter. And then it splits into 12, and then it splits into 24.
Hmm.
24, you know, your major arcana of your tarot card is 24, right? The 24 major arcana. So these are universal templates. If you look at a lot of the mythology, you will see these referenced over and over again, but in other ways. It's referenced in astrology, it's referenced. So all that I did was say, here are the 4 elemental powers that create matter, and they're immensely powerful. It's like sticking your finger into an electrical socket. You know, you're talking, we're not stepping down that power into something a human being could handle. So when the 7 sorcerers treat with those powers, these are the basic building blocks. It's straight out of the Godhead.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so that's why they're handling it with very, very light kid gloves. And so from that omniscient or omnipotent viewpoint, at that elevated a vibration, they're asking an appeal, show us what's going to happen, and we promise not to interfere. Show us the pattern, we promise not to interfere. This is different than their auguries by casting strands, where they would assign a mathematical value to every energetic vector involved. Name it, and then let it loose and see what probabilities form. So one would be a fixed augury and the other would be close to fixed, but not perfect. So strands would be not quite perfect. You could see the fellowship could alter the mathematical equation and see different outcomes. So when they're casting strands, they're playing different probabilities across the spectrum. When they went and talked to the elemental source, which had a, what would I say, sort of a microphone at Earl, they were treating direct with something very, very dangerous. It's ungloved power, not on this dimension and so you look at the defenses that lock it up and you know you're dealing with something serious. So probably I've just flung wide the gates to all kinds of things to make you think twice about what you're reading. But actually, yes, I did delve that deep when I designed this world, because I wanted something that not only was timeless language wise and didn't tie into any particular time period and didn't use idioms from our time and place to lock it and make it age. I wanted to tie into universal things that were common to all cultures so that everybody's culture could plug into this and it would work. It would make sense from any point, any perspective, or any point of view. And probably the only one that wouldn't fit at all is Confucianism, because that comes from something totally different. That doesn't stem from the same sources.
Interesting. On that note, the you have in this volume right here, you have some emphasis on Lysaea wanting to kind of purge the population or whatever, tamp down magic, root out the magic users in the populace, and he's doing that with the help of his new his new priests. And I was just wondering how much of the population is born with magical talent, or is that strictly like a learned, taught type of thing?
All right, I'll dig even wider for you. That's why you have me here, is to see behind the curtain a little bit.
Yeah.
When the Fellowship of Seven created charter law, and that was the pact made with the Paravian Concord and the dragons, both together, to allow humanity to settle on Ethera. They knew that most people in contact with the vibrational frequency that the Paravians run on are going to go crazy. They're literally going to go mad. And you saw that in the Gallant.
Right.
So they had to build into the system a way to handle that. So some of the population could manage it. Some of the population could not. So they designated the people who could handle it and who were willing to be the protective force that kept mankind out of the free wilds or escorted mankind across, except for designated trade routes that were okay for people to frequent. So it wasn't a locked system. If somebody didn't want to become part of the clan bloodlines, they did not have to. And there is no restriction for intermarriage at all. The only thing that restricts is, in the old days when the Paravians were still present, in order to stay there in the free wilds, in order to become part of that system, you had to pass your contact with the Paravians, and not all of them did. So now when you say, could people acquire magic? Could they? Sure, why not? If you evolve your consciousness upwards where you can maintain your stability at a higher frequency and not go crazy, then you could easily pass that test and survive contact with the Paravians and re-anchor your sanity afterwards. And this is true in our world, because some people go insane and they perceive all kinds of things that the rest of us don't, because their minds don't work the same way. And some of them can ground out and come back, and some of them can't. Some of them have to be medicated. Some of them never do. Some of them have multiple personalities because they section off portions of their mind. And so we have all kinds of what we call mental illness. And how much of that is just the inability to separate what they're perceiving from what we think is normal. So if you look at the clan bloodlines, they're the kind of people who could handle that frequency, see things that were a little off the edge. You know, we have people that have hallucinations and visions, and they come back and they're sane. We have geniuses that go off the edge and come back and they're sane. We have geniuses that come off the edge and they come unglued and they never come back. You know, some of the poets took drugs and went wacko. So if you look at it that way, I don't see it as a hard line. Only these people can learn this, or only these people can handle this. But it takes a process of initiation to learn how to maintain stability across frequencies. And we see that in our world too. The various mystical disciplines do the same thing.
All right. Well, no going off the edge, Janny.
I already have.
So the elemental magic that Arathon and Lysair can wield, is that one of the, what do you call, I forget how you put it, sorry, but from the 4 you said you span out to 6 and then and to 12 and so on. Is it one of the
Which exact frequency is it? No, it's simpler than that. It's divided. What Lysair can do is create electromagnetic light. He could create light. He can create frequency in the span of visible light, heat, you know, all the way from heat all the way up to probably extreme ultraviolet, etc. So electromagnetic spectrum. What Arathon can do is the null, the absence of. So his shadow is the absence of, and that's going to correlate with other things that you're going to encounter later in the series. So I'm pulling the underpinnings a little more bare here than I usually bother to in the book, because it really doesn't bear too much on the story, though probably there is a mention of that somewhere. So Arathon is able to remove. It's the absence of, it's the null point of possibility. We're all possibility. So shadow is the absence of. So if that makes sense, the absence of. So it's primordial before creation, but tuned because he knows what he's doing to a very, very exacting degree.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
So yeah, 0 point, create a vacuum, he could do any of that.
So is there a comparative degree, like the thing that Arathon can do is more powerful, or is it just up to their abilities, how they can put this to use?
I would say they're equally powerful, but Lysair is less trained.
Right.
Yeah. Arathon was a master initiate at the age of 18. He was a prodigy also. That's stressed.
Yeah.
You're going to see more of the underpinnings of how he was trained. That is coming. So yeah, he was a prodigy and he reached master initiate at 18 years old.
Got
so think about.
I think you see that training when he confronts Lorenda, and they had like a little philosophical debate about magic, and he
gave her a lecture. Yeah,
he gave her a lecture. Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. Yeah, and so that was a very interesting part of the book, because you could see that he knew exactly what he was talking about, compared to as much training as she had from the Coriani. It didn't match to what he knew as far as magic.
I'm not going to go into it too much further, because later volumes are going to give you exactly how he was trained, or in much more depth, and you may as well encounter it in sync with the story. Not let you get ahead of yourself. So there's a lot more to that, but potentially Lysair could have developed far, far further than he did. He chose not to.
Yeah, that I think that's clear from the story, that Lysair is less powerful at the moment because of training, but I was more curious at a fundamental level if the powers they wield are different. Or
Lysair is fundamentally extremely powerful. He just doesn't have the self-control. He doesn't have that exacting awareness to tune what he's got to the degree that Arathon does. But are they equally powerful? Yeah, on raw terms.
Okay. Yeah.
No question about that. You've seen them clash on raw terms. Just Arathon had that extra edge of awareness. And Lysair, which you can see very plainly in Grand Conspiracy, he wants to eliminate people who understand this stuff because he is afraid of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
He doesn't trust it.
Because he can't control it.
Well, it's more than that. If you look into his history, his mother was from the Raw Van Mages, and to his mind, at 4 years old, she betrayed him.
Mm.
And there's a lot of sources of resentment in what he didn't get from his grandsire. He was given this gift, but no training to use it. So Lysair is a tangle of messes that he's never really truly resolved,
Mhm.
which training as an initiate master would have forced him to resolve. You can't go forward without clearing all that stuff.
And one of his gifts was from his heritage was farsight that was mentioned in here, and I think we start to see a little bit of growth in Lysaea, because I think in this volume we start to see him planning ahead a little bit more than he was previously, especially since we have one chapter in hand where 15 years go by, and we start to see that he's a little bit more patient than what he used to be when it came to just running off and wanting to kill whatever he comes across. So I liked seeing that growth in character.
Have you people
little bit.
read The Child of Prophecy yet?
Not yet.
Okay,
I
so
just
one of the shorts, the distaff side of both Arathon and Lysair descends through Dari Sahelis. And so they have dual royal gifts, but there's more to Dari Sahelis than is on the page yet. That would be unlocked in Child of Prophecy. And you could probably read that at this point. It wouldn't matter.
I just downloaded it today.
Yeah. So Lysair's farsight was always there. It's just he didn't have the cold-blooded determination to access it. Or did he?
Oh boy.
I think it's also fair to say that Lysair relationships have evolved in terms of his the people who are influencing him and their kind of skill set as well being different. So his original allies, so to speak, were very military in nature, whereas his current allies are very much more strategic in nature in terms of
I'm not going to say what's going on underneath of his current allies. You will find that out.
But that's certainly my perspective.
You will find that out, and I'm not going to tip that can over of worms. And if they give you the creeps now, good.
They do.
Who's really in control here? You'll find out.
The high priest.
It's what I think sexually.
I was gonna ask so 2 questions. The inherited farsight, or the gift that the fellowship gave each of the royal lines, does everyone in that royal line, all descendants, have it, but to varying degrees, and that's how the fellowship chooses who the next crown prince will be? Or is it that there's a specific person who inherits it and only that person is able to might be nominated? And the other question is this the first time that we've had a royal line with 2 gifts, or is it something that tends to happen often because of
it was never meant to
intermarrying?
happen? If you'll find out in Child of Prophecy, it was never ever meant to happen. It's freaking hair raising, and more. There's more to this than that. So you will want to read the Child of Prophecy, absolutely, definitely before Arc 4. But at this point, you're probably safe reading it now.
Okay.
I will explain the royal gifts this way, and there is an appendix in Trader's Knot where I go into it. I had no room in the other books to put an appendix, and because the original of Trader's Knot was printed by Misha Merlin first, I threw it in there for the US readers. The same appendix is repeated in Storm Fortress, so if you have the British edition, you do get it in Storm Fortress, but it goes into inheritances of the royal lines, it goes into the purpose of the clans, it goes into the difference between the mayor's rules and the Free Wilds rules, which are run by the clans, and when exactly Crown Justice steps in, because the High King did not rule these people. It's quite a different hierarchy than you think it is. I've left it in place. I've left your assumptions pretty close to in place. But if you read back to book 1, after you have the perspective to understand how this puzzle fits together, you'll realize this is not pseudo-European aristocracy. This is not the Middle Ages. This is something else. So to give you an example, the royal gifts were given to each of the royal lines. They were not meant to be crossed with each other. If you have 50 cousins and you throw 1 glass of water into a bucket, that royal gift is going to disperse over the 50 cousins. So it's going to be rather diluted. So when the fellowship chooses, they choose the person whose basic, normal, born personality enhances the royal gift. So whichever person emerges that can carry it strongest because of their innate personality will be their choice for the High King. Now, if you kill off all the royal line and it's down to 1, that 1 glass of water is in that 1 individual. So for Lysair, that sense of justice is dispersed among all of his cousins and other surviving members of his family, which there are, on Dasanuller. For Arathon, he's the last. So he's got the entire measure. And he had the personality that aligned with it also. So it's a very pernicious mix. And as you will see, that gift of compassion that also matches the bias of his personality. Sometimes it's a strength, and sometimes it's the very weakness that they use to trip him. Sometimes it's very much a weakness. So does that explain to you? So, okay, Lysair, he's got his family sense of justice, but maybe he wasn't the relative that had the strongest personal bias to enhance it.
And so when others die, when all your peers die, you inherit their portion of it, or does
Yeah,
it?
if this pool of blood relatives shrinks, then yes, that driving royal gift is going to drive harder.
Got it. Okay, that's a good.
And the way that happened, exactly how that came about, exactly how the sorcerers did this, keep reading, you'll find out.
Nice. Yeah.
So, was Fianarath one of Arathon's distant relatives? No, absolutely not. Impossible. Sethvir would have known it. It would have been stamped all over him. Impossible. So that piece of speculation there that people are playing with, no, definitely not. And he doesn't behave that way either.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead, Jared.
It's in the glossary. Fianarath's name means one who brings choice.
Choice. Yes.
Yeah. So that was a very interesting definition there, because it seems like he was, of course, as a child, he was tricked into choice, a really bad choice, and but the choice he's bringing is not a choice of his making. It's the choice of 2 Arathons, basically, because he's the the duplicate. He grows into it looking like Arathon, and so it brings on bad choices by the alliance of light soldiers, the mayor, and all that stuff. So it's just I like how that all came together. I love that whole storyline. And how evil.
So yeah, the resemblance here is only skin deep.
Oh yeah. But that also brings in another aspect to the choice of what to do about all that stuff. It's really fascinating.
And the big choice being, of course, how he dies, which I think was we talked about this some in some of our discussions, but it became a real play thing, I think, between yourself, Janny, and the reader, in terms of, like, you were looking at situations. You don't really want Fionn to die. You want them to get, redemption and all of that kind of stuff, and knowledge, I suppose, in a lot of ways of actually what's happening or happened to him. But I think we discussed at some stage when he was captured, it's like the best thing for the world is if he dies just a horrible death by somebody shooting with an arrow while he's in the stocks here. That would actually be really good, which you kind of turn that in yourself and go, what is wrong with me? This is a young boy who hasn't lived his life and hasn't done anything. But actually, if he dies by somebody else's hand or otherwise outside a fire or something, this is good. This is good for our hopes for Arathon and all the rest of it. And yet Arathon is like, okay, he's not aware of the prophecy, but he wouldn't even have entertained any of that, even if he knew about the choices before that. And the choice for him just becomes in the moment of doing the right thing, or that's certainly where he is at the moment. And I think that's a very fun, playful thing to do as a reader, and also in terms of the bigger story.
Well, yeah, I think if you were a kid that you had all your own dreams and you were taught to believe you were special, and you got trained to the sword, and the rest of your brothers are goat herds, and suddenly it all falls apart and the tables are turned and you don't have any control of your life whatsoever, and you're swept into an event that's so much bigger, and you're even forced onto the wrong side. No wonder this kid is screwed up.
Yeah, it is showed. I think it did a great job with his characterization, with showing how young and inexperienced
He's
he
18
really
years
was.
old. Yeah, he's 18 years
And
old. What
he's
18-year-old can make sense of something like that?
none. I wouldn't be able to make sense of it if it happened to me now. It's just that's a crazy situation for a kid to be put in. And
So yeah, all that
he's
teenage angst and all that,
Mhm.
you aren't the center of the universe, and not only that, you're swept onto the side you did not want to be on.
yeah, and and that brings me back to Lorenda and how her storyline in this book was a really nice, like it was almost like a novel to itself, her storyline in this book. And it starts off with her playing the part of the devil, basically, and giving this fake prize to a kid to get him to agree to this ritual. And then what happens to her as it goes on into the end, and her downfall of her plans, thwarted by Arathon. It was just a excellent story arc that I enjoyed immensely.
Yeah. I like those brief moments where I almost liked Lirenda. For the most part, did not like her at all. But I love those brief moments where, there was almost a 180. She immediately did something to make me go back to disliking her. but, but the brief moments I thought were brilliant, where we got more insight into her origins or all the things that make her who she is. I did love those scenes quite a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say it's so interesting because as much as you dislike her, Portia, you understand her. She's a woman
Yeah.
that's filled full of self-loathing. She hates herself for the fact that she's got this intense attraction that sort of
Mhm.
clouds judgment thing. She knows it's not good for her. And again, I think it's hilarious that at the end of the book, she sort of gets everything that she really, really wants in her heart of heart, from that whole experience, but will ultimately cause her downfall in a lot of ways. So it's just a very kind of
If you
confused
dig
character.
back into some of her history that the books probably don't reveal because they don't need to, it hints at it. But you knew that from those Talith and when she meets the mayor's daughter in Urdane, before the marriage, Lysa's marriage to Elaine, you know that the women in that section of society were pretty repressed.
Yeah. Yep.
So you figure Ilara came from the street. She had a great deal of freedom. She had a totally different kind of upbringing. She had agency as a poor kid. Lorenda did not. If she came from a very restricted Westlands household, she came from an aristocratic background that is plainly shown in the book.
Yeah.
So her choices would have been marriage, and her way out was the Coriani order. That gave her agency, that gave her power, and her way of reconciling her upbringing was, give me all the power I can get and I can never be forced back. I can never be forced back into other people putting me in a box. So a lot of her addiction to ambition is exactly that. This was her way out, and this was her way of gaining agency, and this was her way of getting back at the restrictive conditions she came out of. And people get obsessive.
Mhm.
She basically has broken free, but not free enough to satisfy her. So to her, being pushed back into, oh my gosh, I fell for a man, or I want something different than what I've chosen, it put her in a very intense personality clash with herself.
And was part of that also brought on by herself because she's the one who initiated that um that ritual with Alara, which kind of gave her that emotional attachment to
Emotional attachment to Arathon began in book 1.
It did,
And
yeah.
her prime warned her it was the scrying where Alara was told to dig back into both half-brothers' personalities and do that deep scrying that was going to give
That's
Moriel the insight into their character. And when Alara was given that assignment, Lorenda says that's going to break her conditioning against having a relationship. That's going to destroy basically her loyalty to the order. It's going to destroy her ability to let this attraction go. And Moriel says that, yeah, she knows she's doing it on purpose. It's worth breaking the instrument to get a different instrument.
Right. And that was in Alara's case.
And Lorenda is warned at the time of that scrying, beware that you don't get sucked into.
Oh, and she did.
If you go back to book 1, you'll see it plain as daylight. And she did.
Yeah.
So Arathon hooked into that at the end of Fugitive Prince. He found that weak spot, and he put the music on the table and he brought it alive. Why? Because Arathon, and you learned how he works with people.
Yep.
He doesn't cater to their faults. He hammers their faults until you're taught to get rid of them. He will use your faults to his advantage until you cast them off. Whereas Lysair binds people to him by kissing up to their faults and making them comfortable with their faults. So they have two opposite ways. One is the way of the master and one is not. So he used that attraction and he opened up that possibility for actually Lorenda to heal herself. He said, there's a part of your personality that's frozen. Wake it up. Doesn't have to be with him. It could have been with anybody. He offered her the chance to feel and to have love. And she slammed a door. So yeah, if you look at that final sequence in Fugitive Prince, that's exactly what happened. So since she didn't cast off that fault, what was he going to use? And I know that, you guys all go, oh, this is really creepy. Kissed her against her will. Was it really against her will? And secondly, if you split his choice, if you split his choice in that moment, his choice in that tunnel at the end of Grand Conspiracy was find a way to bring Lorenda to her knees, find a way to compromise her such that she would not reveal to the Prime that Alara was going to compromise herself by opening the door. So he used that weakness that she had not cast aside. And he says, if you're going to take other people's emotions and bend them to your will, see how it feels. So that was the bloodless way, without killing, without doing murder, he used her weakness, forced the issue. And now, in order for Lorenda to keep that secret, she's also got to keep Alara's secret that Alara opened the door. So they were both equally culpable of breaking the Prime's rule. So it was a very clever double bind. It was coldly calculated, yes, on Arathon's part, but he had given her plenty of chance to dump that weakness ahead, and she did not do it. That's how he operates. Remember it.
It's interesting to cast obviously the horrors and the terrible things that Lorinda did against the Prime, against Muriel, because she is somebody that is taking over people's free will. She's actually doing the evil things, I think, than the story. She's the person that actually seems to have gone mad in a lot of ways with, trying to stop the end of the Coriani, all of that prophecy that she has there, and she feels there's no choice. But in the end, she is literally off the beam. Plus, she also kind of reset the world in a lot of ways as well.
Look at carefully all of the scenes where Muriel makes her choices. What is Muriel's biggest fear? I think you can answer that from the manuscript. What is her biggest fear?
That she'll die without a successor.
Bingo.
Yeah.
You don't know what that means yet. What is she protecting? Why is this succession so important that she will break every rule in the book? Wait for it. But see what I'm saying? It's been said over and over what her biggest fear is.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, oh, she's evil. Well, is she? You don't know what she's protecting. You don't know what her moral high ground is. You don't know what she figures the means to the end is worth it.
So does she train just one successor at a time, or does it just so happen that we have caught her at a time when she has one person who is up to the training that they need to be a potential successor?
No, she would pick one at a time because they stand second to her.
Hmm.
If something happens, they're going to have to carry it, and they're not equipped to. And if you look back, you will find one little line in a previous book that she's had
42.
Forgive me. Yeah, they've all failed. She's 42 have died, unable to make that crossing. And Sephir says outright, Alara had the strength to do it. And Muriel broke that tool. Why did she do it? To take down Arathon. Why is she so afraid of Arathon? Now, watch where those threads spin off in the future, because you don't know everything in perspective that's driving these behaviors. You think you do. Oh, she's just evil. Oh, she's just going mad.
Well,
maybe.
I like dealing in absolutes. It's much more comfortable for me at the time. At the moment.
It's much more comfortable for all of us in the human condition. That's what enables us to go to sleep at night, because we're forced in life to make decisions all the time, and we don't have the perspective to make the right choice. Because invariably we get the Morse perspective, and that was not the right choice. So how do you live with that? You try to carve it into absolutes until they break. And then there's no choice but to forgive yourself, go forward, and make another mistake, because you don't have the perspective. As your perspective grows, you know less.
Well, at this point, she's evil. Okay. I'll learn later better.
I can re-examine my thoughts and feelings about that once I know more. But for the moment,
we'd like to hate her. Please, thank you very much.
Well, you hated Pascal too, and if I did my job right, you understood him, and you kind of were sorry when he died, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
Okay, she's evil, but there's another facet to that.
Oh yeah.
That's why you keep reading, though.
That is why,
those doors are never closed. Those things are never closed.
So I did have a question though. The Muriel wanting Arathon out of the picture, I seem to remember that was born out of some scrying that she did, which told her that if Arathon lives, that the Coriani order will die out, or at least that she will die without a successor. Is that still her reason, or does she have more?
That was her. It was her scrying back in Ships of Marior, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so.
Beginning of Ships of Marior, that if Arathon survived, she would die without a successor.
Mm-hmm. And that's,
and when you realize the significance of what that is, a lot of balls of wax will unravel. So you'll find out. Just keep reading, you'll find out.
So maybe this is also a read and find out question, but I'll just throw it out there. Now that she has transferred herself into this newer, younger body, is that still on the table, that she would die without a successor? Did she potentially see that in her scrying that time when she figured that?
Is she dead?
No, I mean.
All right, she's not dead.
Yeah.
So therefore.
So that's still
If she isn't dead,
Okay.
that prophecy would still be valid.
okay. Speaking of prophecies, just asking a series of read and find out questions here, folks. Um, all the things that Arathon did towards the end of Grand Conspiracy, sorry, in which he claimed, "I'm the crown prince and I forbid this from happening," and so on, like when he's rescuing Fionn Arad. Is that enough for
No.
the Black Rose prophecy?
No.
Okay.
No, no, and no. You realize that in Curse of the Mistwraith, he is attuned one attunement to the earth. He is bound to the earth as the crown prince. As a sanctioned crown prince, he is bound to the land.
Hmm.
Earth, air, fire, water. There are 3 other attunements that would have gone with the upstepped attunements for a crown prince. Again, we are not talking European aristocracy. This will come out as you read. You will see it. So no, all he's done is played the part, but he has not been officially crowned High King. He has not gone through the 4 elemental attunements that would go with that. So he is not a crowned High King. Not happened.
Okay. So it's not about just accepting
Mm-mm.
psychologically. But
Nope. Nope. Not in the way that you would count coup on that one. So you'll just have to keep reading.
Mhm.
But no, has the Black Rose prophecy been fulfilled? Totally not. For that reason, because the Atheran high kingships are not what you think of as all that pomp and circumstance that goes on when they put a King of England on the throne. It has nothing to do with that. It is
Hmm.
completely other. The function of the high kings completely other. What they did completely other. Much different. And this will unfold as you go forward.
Hmm.
And I had a what actually causes prophecy, like with Jarrett's dreams and Dakar. It like what aspect of the, like you were speaking about the 4 powers earlier, what causes prophecy to happen?
Okay, have you ever seen those written experiments where they took they took electrons and they fired a single electron through a tiny narrow slit? They fired basically a spray of electrons. One was allowed through. Okay. And there was a sheet of photographic paper on the back of that. This is a real experiment. Oh, you're nodding, Chris. You've seen this. Unobserved, that electron causes a spray of gray. It actually behaves like a wave. So when you send a wave through a narrow opening, it fans out and becomes a ripple. So that single electron goes through and it acts like a wave. But when there's an observer, it acts like a particle and you get 1 point.
Right.
So the unobserved electron sprays a fan of probability. The observer determines the outcome and you get 1 point. One observer, 1 point on the film. This is an actual physical experiment. So what happens with a prophecy? You have an individual who attunes to a different frequency and they can see the span of probability, and the more likely one, based on their personality, possibly their outlook, possibly whatever, is going to pick one of those points of probability. But it may not be fixed. Something else, another observer or another set of circumstances may move that electron, and the actual burn on the film may be somewhere different. Or multiple people observing would focus that into a narrower band of probability. So that's what Dakar is doing when he does his conscious prophecies, is he's picking out a probability that's probably pretty strongly sure that it's going to happen. When he's unconscious, that is a whole different ball game, and I'm not going to reveal that because the books will.
Was his unconscious stuff related, is similar to when Jarrett's unconscious or sleeping? Or is that
Jarrett's unconscious was actually being engineered by Davien, that eagle.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh,
oh.
enough said. Enough said there. Okay.
Well, it's all written there on the page because, and there was a raven in there too.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of things going on in that prophecy. So his unconscious. So the unconscious ones, all that's saying is you're tapping probability, a frequency higher than you can be awake.
Mhm.
So
Is
it's
that-
probably going to narrow those possibilities down to closer to zero. But Jarrett woke up and remembered. Dakar does not. His real blackouts are blackout.
Right.
And I'm not going into why. Now, when you look at Saphir sitting with the Earth Sense in Alpine Tower, he taps the entire range of probability. He sees all of the possibilities, and then he sees them gather like a shadow into a nexus point, and that's when things narrow, where the possibilities narrow down, and all the forces of everybody else aware and making decisions in the world are going to reduce that possibility. That probability is going to become possibility, probability, actuality.
That is a pretty cool explanation.
So yeah, it's based on physics, it's based on the quantum, it's based a bit on string theory, it's based on all kinds of parallel, so I didn't fly off the handle and just, oh, let's have this, it'd be cool. I started with systems based in cosmology, myth, and cultural things, and I correlated that template on top of physics and arrived at something that was a universal access. So you could access this from many different angles, not just one. I had a very interesting experience when I was in Australia. It all kind of fell together. I was going for a book tour in Australia way back when. And about 2 weeks before I was leaving, Don and I had planned, we built extra time into our trip to go to Alice Springs. And before I left, I got an email from a guy who lived in Alice Springs who said, I want to write a song about one of the names of a boat that is in one of your books. And could I name the song out after that? And if you like, I'll send you the CD so you can hear the recording. And I wrote him back just kind of off the cuff and said, go ahead and name the song. I'm happy with that. And
Yeah.
don't send me the CD because I'm coming to Alice Springs and I will listen to it. So this devolved into a curious conversation about what kind of beer should I drink and what sites should I see. And it went off the deep end from there because what did I want to do while in Alice Springs? I said, well, we're going to try to get one of those guys, rent a Jeep and go into the outback. And my friend on the other end said, I'm a wilderness guide and I have the Jeep and then we went off into the deep end of, you can't get into Aboriginal territory without pulling permits. And who did I know in indigenous cultures in the United States? And I told him, well, I know these people and these people. And we had this back and forth conversation. And he said, fine, I'll pull all the permits and I will take you to meet the senior lawman of an indigenous group that I have been adopted to.
Wow.
Wow.
Because he had gone into the outback to take scientists there, and the Aboriginal had to show the scientists where to find the animals because the scientists couldn't do their study without the Aboriginal knowledge. And Justin ended up adopted because he was the only one in the entire group that pitched in and helped them gather firewood and, pulled his weight, basically. So he pulled the permits and he took me to meet this man who was in his 90s, late 90s. And I only got a short time and all I did was sit at his feet and listen. And it was fascinating because he described his perception of his world. And he described the weather. And the weather was either good or not so good. Then he described what the people were doing. And that was good or not so good. And the animals, what the animals were doing, good or not so good. And then what the kids were doing because they were not taught by their parents well. And this was not so good. And when you paused and you thought about what he was talking about, he was lining up the templates of the electromagnetic transmission from the emotional emanations from the kids all the way, the state of his land vertically, energetically vertically, and it all lined up. So he was giving me the entire picture at multiple frequencies of what was happening in his territory. And if you look at the Aboriginal art, it's all done by remote projection, looking straight down. The people look like little, the views of Uluru, which Europeans called Ayers Rock, but it's Uluru, shows the springs and the mapping of the springs, and it's all vertical, as if you were in an airplane. And if you fly over their territory in an airplane, you're looking at what their territory would look like from the air. Their paintings are an aerial view of their country. So this all lined up, a whole bunch of other things lined up that was, very off the scale of what you would expect. So looking at that and looking at what goes on Ethera, you'll see that those templates line up.
Nice.
I was going to say, I thought that other book we were reading was the physics book, because we spent an hour discussing that yesterday, and it was like baby's first physics compared to just what we've been discussing.
Which book was this that you were talking about?
We've been doing the Southern Reach trilogy, so it was Jeff Vandermeer's kind of
okay,
alternate Earth kind of thing, and what could be going on there. And we got into very deep physics conversation about what actually could be going on if it was based on realism.
Now you fall face first into a fantasy that isn't supposed to do that. I'm
Exactly
sorry.
right.
I'm sorry, not sorry.
I think I was
Always
joking
eliminating.
sorry. I was joking in one of our conversations for Grand Conspiracy that this is actually science fiction, not fantasy, because of the basis in the world. But
Well, you realize I took a lot of science in college. I almost became an astronomer. I almost went and became an oceanographer. I was studying microbiology. And it's like I gave it up because the bandwidth was too narrow to show what I was actually encountering. And so my exploration went way wide, but it didn't invalidate what I learned in those disciplines. It expanded what I learned in those disciplines. So it all got incorporated into this world for reasons which you haven't seen yet, but you will.
nice. That's really good. So the Davian Judith thing, I'm still hung up on that thing. But is that what happens every time Jared sees a dream, or is that just what happened in that one instance?
No. If you look back to the single moment that caused Davian to break out of his isolation, and the full story of why he was in isolation hasn't been told yet.
No, right.
And you're not going to see it all until down the line. But there was a moment where something happened. And it broke his isolation. And that is tied into why he did what he did, to have Jarrett have that vision, to turn Jarrett's course and change the course of what Jarrett decided to do. And I'm not going to necessarily point out exactly what that moment was. I'll let you thumb back in and figure it out. But there was one specific trigger that broke him out of isolation after all these hundreds of years.
Well, I'm going to guess it's when they used that skull from a dragon. That's my guess. No?
Nope.
All right.
I thought it was when Muriel broke the world, but was it a specific thing
Nope.
that happened as part of
Nope.
That was going to be my guess, but I knew from the way Janny was talking, it was much more specific than the breaking of the world. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like everything got reset.
There was one moment that triggered what happened, why he broke his isolation. And I didn't explain it. I didn't drop the hammer on it. I just put it there because there's a reason. You know, it's like there's certain casual mentions of things in Curse of the Mistwraith. There's certain scenes that were even gone in depth in Curse of the Mistwraith. You still haven't seen to the bottom of what actually happened there. And yet when you go back and read it, you'll see that it did. So you go back and read it, you'll see that it did, but there's no point in doing like some of these fantasy writers do, which is this is what this means. No. I'm not going to drop an expository lump in the middle of
Well,
this scene. It's just that's the moment that triggers it.
well, thank you for that.
It's in here. If you go back, you'll find it. So go
Well-
back and look at where Davian starts to emerge in this book.
I was going to say it'll not be too hard to find because the time
Yeah,
that
if
we
you-
get a Davian POV was a bit like a hammer for the reader of going, oh, we've been waiting on the appearance or the consciousness of this character. He's obviously
Right.
mentioned a lot,
So
yeah.
look at what triggered that.
Mm.
He didn't just decide, I got up this morning and I'm going to. No, it was pretty much spelled out. So, yeah, it was actually, I try to show the action and the reaction in the moment all the way across the boards. So it's in the moment.
Does Chibipo know? Chibipo, I bet you're dying. to
Oh,
tell
yeah,
me.
sure. Chibipo knows where it is. And when you finish Storm Fortress, then you can read Black Bargain and that will go into it deeper.
Yeah.
You'll want to read all of the shorts before you start Arc 4.
Okay.
Because it isn't necessary. The books will deliver you the things that you need to know to keep reading, but those short stories are going to give you a whole lot more depth of background and more nuance. So before you start Arc 4, you want to read those.
Got it. And Child of Prophecy, we can read now, you said?
Yeah, you could read that one now. You could read all of them now, but I wouldn't touch Black Bargain
Right. Yeah.
until after Storm Fortress.
I just got the other 4 while we were chatting. So, yeah.
Nice.
And it wouldn't ruin the book. It wouldn't at all ruin the book. It would just give you way more perspective into what's happening than maybe you want to have at this point. But it wouldn't spoil anything. It would just mean that you have another angle of awareness as to what's really going on. But there would be, if that happened, other points of tension would come forward. So you still wouldn't have the whole picture. Just I do recommend wait on Black Bargain till after Storm Fortress because it'll make Peril's Gate read a whole lot more interesting without that perspective, or maybe not. I never had anybody do it backwards.
I can be your test case. These guys know I like to read spoilers sometimes.
Well, if you do that, then you got to keep your mouth shut.
That's true.
Not that either.
Don't do
just-
that, Masha. Don't do it.
Give her a push, why not?
Oh,
I'll just be Chibipo for Peril's Gate going like
Well, the whole reason why that story got written was because of Evil as a Matter of Perspective. It was written for that anthology. So I wrote it for that. And that's why I would recommend that you slot it in later. But people are going to do what people are going to do. Nobody's going to see it all.
your reputation precedes you, Varsha. This is just what happens now.
Yes. Now I just have to do it. So I had a joke for this discussion that we're going to talk about Davian dragons and Dakar, and I just threw Dakar in there for the third D. But dragons, let's talk about dragons. The skulls that I forget the name of the character, but when they put out the skulls and Satvir couldn't see there anymore, and that also there were several almost world-shaking events in this book. That was very interesting, and I think it does really build on everything we know about dragons already, that they can bend space-time and reality and so on. And it's amazing that the remnants, the dead remnants of dragons, can do so much, not damage, but can affect the world.
Oh, yeah, it can damage the world more than just affect it.
Mhm.
There's serious business when they die unhappy and they don't dissolve their consciousness. It's serious mess.
And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you saw that in Fugitive Prince, the levels of protection.
Yeah. And there was a dragon couple that died unhappy, right? That they were going to, that said that the Fellowship were going to go stabilize after Moriel broke the world.
There are
So-
18 Grimwards.
Hmm.
Not all of them were affected for various reasons.
Hmm.
She didn't destabilize everything. The lanes go not just north-south, they band the planet. They go
Hmm.
all the way around.
Like the latitudes and longitudes.
Right. So she destabilized the ones that were crossing the Aetheran continent, and probably one extra, one over. Maybe one over, maybe not. I'd have to go back and count. So yeah, she destabilized 18 Grimwards. There are more, but she
I see.
destabilized that bandwidth, and so it would have gone all the way back around the back of the continent. But she didn't destabilize everything, because if there's 24, if you divide the world in half, 24 lanes, but it's actually 12 because they go around the back of the continent. Am I making sense now? Your Mercator map of the entire world would show vertical lines, but they go all the way around the world. Your longitudes go around the world.
I see.
Correct?
Yeah.
So your lanes go all the way around the world too. She only destabilized the ones across the continent, so she didn't get them all.
So she didn't stabilize them to the point where they went around the world, just to the extent.
Well,
that
the ones that she destabilized would have gone around the world, but
Okay.
that's only 6. There's 12, which would be 24 in the Mercator projection. Am I making sense now?
I think so. Yeah.
If you have the world, 12 bands that go around the world, now you take the world and you flatten it out into a Mercator projection.
I see.
You'd have
Yeah, okay.
24 vertical lines, but actually here and here are the same lane, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So she destabilized 6 or 7. I'd have to go back into the book to get the exact number. So any Grimward that was on those lines would have been upset.
Got it. So she only broke half the world.
She only broke half the world. You got it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would have been an even worse mess, because there's a lot more to what's alive and moving on this world than you see for this story.
Yeah, we got a couple of peeks at different things. Like we got a little peek at the Centaur. What was his name? Shaunaroy or something like that.
Oh,
and
the
we got-
Riddler.
yeah, we got a peek
It's
at
built
him.
into the foundation at Mainmere. Yep, you've got Sheehan Althane that's built into the foundation of Althane Tower. You've got the ghosts of some, if you spin time around sideways, of ones that were in charge of certain regions. The Centaur Guardians were tied to the earth, and some of them were builders and makers, but some of them were tied to certain regions, and some of them were shipbuilders. So they had certain specific tasks that they did.
Yeah. And so we got the brief glimpse of Davian, and we got and of course we have the dragon skulls as well. And it was interesting that somebody pointed out to Lysaea and his cabal that they're turning to evil turned by evil to embrace the very powers of, like, he was accusing them of using evil to combat evil. And I found that interesting that they are looking on these artifacts as evil artifacts. And I'm wondering how much that's gonna play into future stuff as well. But it was a lot of glimpses of ancient history in this
There
book.
was a lot of glimpses of things
hint
that are
at it,
going to
yeah.
balloon into other directions. Go back and look at Sethvir's healing of the guys who were tranced by the trees.
Oh yeah.
Right.
There was a lot more going on in that scene. A whole lot more going on in that scene.
Our poor Sethvir.
Oh yeah, well, it just reads like, oh well, that's kind of interesting, but there's nothing in there that's not there for a purpose.
Yeah, I loved the descriptions of the men who have the tree consciousness, like who have sort of become one with the consciousness of trees and how they moved. That was one of my favorite sections in the book. I think I have since forgotten about it because it's been 2 months since we read it. But yeah, I loved that section when we when we went through that.
It's a section people tend to forget because of the momentousness of the events that happen at the end of the book.
Mm,
And they kind of write off what happened at the beginning, but that scene is signal. It's huge.
good to know. So yeah, I don't know. I went through my list of questions. Do you guys have any more to chat about? Chibipo, you've been quiet.
He's laughing in the background, right?
You guys have had a lot of good questions, and I was trying to find the thing Jenny asked about. So I've been hunting through the books for that, but I'm not having a lot of luck in finding that part so far.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think it's time to take Chibi Poe's advice.
And go read Petal's Gate.
Go read
5
Poe.
minutes later. It starts 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
And make sure that you didn't miss the exchange at the very end of Grand Conspiracy, because Arathon made a promise to that kid to get him to shut up and put up and leave town. And that promise is pretty important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you already know, Jared, because you started the next book. It's going to explode off the page pretty fast.
Yeah. No, it does. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
So yeah, I can't wait. I'm really excited because anybody who stopped reading before Peril's Gate or stopped reading before the finish of Arc 3, you really are beginning to. Peril's Gate's going to peel it back. That's where this series is going to start to become something more than you expected compared to other fantasies. That's where it's going to start to really dig in deep. And the top of some of your expectations and assumptions are going to get ripped to shreds.
Okay.
Very nice. So
You've read all these books, and you know that the halfway point of all of these books is where everything goes sideways and the whole perspective changes. Well, that's going to happen in Peril's Gate. That is a tipping point for the series, and it will forever affect the rest of how the rest falls out. So what you think the story is going to be about, what you think is the major points of conflict, not necessarily.
yeah. Cool. Yeah, let's all go read Petal's Gate now. And keep an eye out for the Curse of the Mystery audiobook and the Song of the Mysteries release in May. And we'll do outros now. Everybody tell us where people can find you and how many points you last lost at the blackjack tape.
Well, I'll go first because I don't lose money in the blackjack table.
Oh,
Because
wow. Brackets.
you play one hand, you win it, you walk away, right? Or you play the first hand, you lose, you don't tell anybody about it. It's very easy. But you can find me on my YouTube channel. Let's go for the Chronicle of Chris, or you can find me on the Page Train forums, or on the Speculative Speculations podcast.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I am on that speculative speculation podcast as well, and also I am at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and also I don't play blackjack, but I know Vash is going to try to talk me into it. But
Well, we don't play it. It's just the board and it keeps taking all of our points. So honestly, it's fine if you don't play.
good.
And Janny, yeah, I guess I'll put up the links for pre-order and stuff, but
Yeah, well, you can find me. You can find all kinds of scholarly information on the website. There's a Paravia wiki. I'm really easily findable on my email. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I have an account at Goodreads. I'd probably see a direct message there. And I pop in and out of our fantasy every now and then. I pop in and out of page chewing. So anything lands there, I would probably see it. But I'm probably one of the most accessible people in the world. There's only one Janny Wurts. You can find me. And thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to see you enjoying yourselves.
Very much so.
I am can be found on Page Chewing and on Twitter, and I still refuse to call it X. Sorry. And yeah, that's about it.
Cool. And you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, on the podcast Speculative Speculations, which also I post as videos, audio spectrum videos on the YouTube channel. And yeah, come find us on the Patreon forum if you'd like to read along with us, talk about these books with us. Come check out the Patreon forum or play blackjack with us. All right. We'll see everyone in about a month talking about Peril's Gate, the first 4 chapters for the first discussion. That's what we're doing around the first week of May. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon. Bye.